Welcome to the Mucked Up My Self-Care podcast.
I'm Jill from New York.
And I'm Linda from Tasmania.
We are two moms from opposite sides of the world who are living, demonstrating, and helping moms across the world build their self-care asset bank.
Ready to dive in? Messy, interrupted, imperfect, and most of all mucked up. Let's get going. Let's do this, she says. Let's do this. Good morning. Good evening. Hello.
Yeah. Whatever time of the day it is for you.
I know. It's Thursday for you, Friday for me. It's all those end of week feels.
Yep, for sure.
It's been a huge week. Oh, yeah. What week isn't huge, though? Seriously. No. Shall we start from highs and lows?
I think so. And I think, Linda, would you tell us your muck high, muck low today?
Muck high, muck low. So muck high, I woke early this morning and actually managed to get an hour and a half without other little people making their way around the house. So that was really, really nice because I've started editing the chapters for the next book. Being that I have one in my hand, I'm going to have another one in my hand shortly after I have the momentum helping me along, and I'm happy to ride that wave because, yeah, it's really important to me right now as well. And muck low, definitely recognize I need a bit more sleep and the after effects of that. Also lost my voice this week for a couple of days, which was interesting in parenting. I'm so glad my older two can read because I was scribbling notes on pieces of paper at the night. They're like, Mom, I can't read your handwriting. What does that say? And yeah, that sort of thing. So that was interesting. Very hard with the toddler who didn't really understand, but also at the same time didn't probably notice as much as the other two, interestingly. So it was, yeah, not something I think you should do voluntarily, but it was an interesting exercise all the same. Oh dear. What about you? Hi, hello.
Let's see. Trying to figure out what my low is. I think my low is that I ended up being more melty after an event than I thought I would be, and not necessarily like right after more, like how long after it lasted.
Yeah, unpredictable.
And that was interesting because I didn't recognize it until like I watched a show. And like Hallmark movie, kind of make you want to cry, feel good kind of.
Yes.
Crying because of whatever happened in it. And afterwards, I'm like, I am so drained, like beyond imagine. Like I actually had a cry for a purpose because I needed to cry, but I didn't.
Yep.
And I felt like I did. I was like, wow, I must have been way more melty than I thought. 4 days later, I'm now crying after watching a movie. That was just a little bit of a low for the week. And then I think my high is reading, selfishly enough, because it's what I had to read first, was my chapter in your book.
Aww.
And it was just so beautiful and I loved it. And it was just so refreshing to read and such a fantastic writing experience. Like absolutely beautiful, Linda. Congratulations on the book. I'm so excited. I can't wait to read the rest of it now. But like I'm gonna be and skip to the middle and read my chapter.
I think I expected that a lot of people might do the same thing. And it's interesting because when we had that conversation, that was, coming up to almost a year ago now, and definitely probably didn't have the friendship that we have now from that. So I wonder if we had the same conversation and I wrote another chapter, if it would be similar, or how, like, I'd probably feel even more, I'd be like you, I'd be bawling while writing this. And some of those chapters I felt like especially the one with the kids. So in the back of the book, I actually wrote a letter to each of the kids. And
Yeah.
for that, I know that I definitely had tears, and I was like, oh my gosh, where did that come from? Oh my gosh. And then they've got little pictures of them as babies and them with them when they are now. And so much of their personalities was in there, and what I desire for them and what I know about them. And yeah, it's a really special moment, I think. Yeah. Yeah. So, and I've got so many friendships from so many of those conversations that I hold very near and dear now. And while they might not be the in-person friendships that we are told society needs us to have, these people that we can knock on the door, and while that's got its own benefits, I absolutely love my online friendships now.
Oh yeah. I'd have to say some of them might be even closer than people who are in person.
I agree. Yep. And that's a very hard concept.
Yeah.
I think it's a really hard concept for more of maybe the masculine type energy to accept, in my experience. It's like, how can you've never actually met these people. These people are just through the screen. They don't see the other aspects of your life or outside the four walls of this room a lot of the time. So, but in many ways, people do not have the privilege to know every single part of me, even my closest friends. Mm-hmm.
I have close friends who probably never even stepped foot inside my house.
Yep. Yeah.
So they've never seen my home life, but they've seen me out by them where I'm not hiding my home life, just never had the opportunity to come here. So
yeah,
you've seen more of my home and halfway across the world.
Yeah, it's just, I just think we're led to this idea that friends in person hold some sort of higher value or something. Is it really just me who thinks that that's placed on us, or is it still a thing? Should it be a thing? I thought that should have been.
I feel that over the years it's been a little bit more acceptable lately, but it's starting out with, we'll bring it in there, but online dating's been around for years. And not even online dating, just online chat rooms where people do make friends virtually, never actually get to meet until years down the road. It's been
scary,
but it's always been looked down on way back, I feel like, and until more recently has it been, where we're actually seeing people we would have seen in person virtually. So that changed in society's outlook on what being friendly online is like.
Yeah, I suppose there's a fine line there, though, of being friendly online and then letting people in completely. Like I think about the online world for the kids as they're approaching 11, 12, 13, and things like Tinder and online dating apps. And it scares me quite a bit. And there's a lot of influence.
The first time I met some of the people in our community, I was questioning whether or not I was being catfished this whole time, like somehow hanging out with you all, just friends, virtually. Somehow you guys were catfishing me. And when I met you in person, you wouldn't be who you were. I don't know how that's.
Yeah, I know. You might. It's like, do they actually have a lower half of their body? Do they have legs and feet? And what shoes do they wear? I've got no idea what shoes you wear. Like, what size are your feet? It's there. Yeah.
God. Oh, I'm curious on the dynamic then, Linda, because you were saying, like, is there a difference in having in-person versus, like, is it really more important to have an in-person friend versus a virtual friend? And I wonder if it's because of the experiences that you can have with either. We'll have like this podcasting or in our community, where we get together and have conversations via messages.
Hmm.
But my in-person friends, I get to go out and go public places with them and have experiences. So does that come into like how that affects relationships, but then also like, we've talked about this being our self-care. So yes, I'm including you into
Yeah.
my self-care, but do I include them,
Yeah.
my in-person friends, in my self-care? Or, like, what
Hmm.
do those aspects look like with where our friends are?
Yeah, and if we're talking about relationships, there's the typical systemic type structure that we are led to believe relationships are, right? Marriage, to monogamous parents who raise children, and there is friendships that are the onset of that. And if we look at relationships as a vague overview, there is a physical aspect of that. I love to hug my in-life friends. I love to, like you said, go places together and see things and do things physically, maybe jumping in a car all together, or, going to church together, or, all of those things that we do in person, which we can't necessarily then do online. So there is a physical aspect missing, which I think is inbuilt into us as something that we desire as young children, as babies. When babies are born, they are dependent on their parents. If they were born solo, they are one entity and they would not survive if they did not have a parent to be dependent on. And it's something that I've been thinking about and hearing and having some conversations around is this idea of dependence, becoming independent. And the system that we live in, it encourages independence from a very early age.
Yeah.
And one thing that I know and believe to my bones is that dependence is bred from interdependence. If you do not have an attachment and a security with and a bond with your primary caregiver in the first place, the dependence is then forced upon you and therefore ineffective, both short-term, long-term, and creates an external validation, which means you're not driven internally.
Yeah.
And so the idea of self-soothing and self-regulating and self, it's never entirely yourself that does that. Even as adults, if we are not relying on another human as much as we are in infancy, we rely on maybe other things to help us soothe, like going for a walk or patting your cat or eating some nutritious food or having some sleep. We are still working in unison with these other things to soothe. We're not doing it fully and solely and completely on our own. And whether that's simply looking outside to nature or looking at a tree, we are still intertwined with something somehow. And there's more effective and ineffective ways of doing that. If you're reverting to alcohol or drugs or, all sorts of addictive type behaviors to self-soothe, it's still a dependence on that thing. And we can still depend on taking a dog for a walk or patting the cat or, that sort of degree of dependence, I think is okay in a different sort of way. Anyway, I feel like I just jumped up onto a high horse and took for a lovely ride.
And that's a very interesting view on that, for sure.
Yeah. And I think and this all ties back into the friendships as well, because there's this friction, if you like, in society, which is telling us to be dependent and source for ourselves and get a job for ourselves and do things independently from such a young age and then into adulthood, which then we're also told to form friendships and build circles and have a village and have friends, both physically and online as well, which I think is just as important as knowing yourself and becoming somewhat dependent and not entirely reliant on others. So it's a bit of a paradox. A bit.
Where do we go from there?
Sorry. Like, just cast a line and see what we catch. She's trying to gather her thoughts really quickly late at night. Sorry, I feel like I've just thrown a curveball.
No, but I'm trying to think of like how this then comes into play with the shift we see as we take on a new identity in our role as parent. With that, whatever society is like kind of like instructing us to do with all those things, like we go from without baby having friends a specific way and these expectations put on us on the way we should have friends or be dependent on things, and then we all of a sudden have this huge change where we now have that person who is dependent on us. And how does that then shift for our relationships outside of that? Because are we still having the room to depend on someone else when someone is depending on us?
Yep, exactly. And then the guilt that comes into that, like, should I be dependent on friends right now when I feel so depended on?
Yeah.
And how do I?
We know we need to depend on other people to get through this,
Yep.
but there's this feeling of, well, when I was this way, I had to depend on myself. When I was in the situation that this person depending on me is, sometimes we're trying to correct generational trauma stuff. So we feel like we can't force our dependent to have the same upbringing we did. So now we're like full force paying attention to them and almost cutting ourselves out from all those relationships around us, which I think is where that guilt comes in, because we know we need the support from them, but we feel so overwhelmed with having to care for them that there's no more space.
Yeah. And then we also want to display healthy friendships for our kids to view and see as good examples. We want to encourage them through things that help them also form their own friendships. And then how do we foster the friendships when they are like, it's so connected, right? Because in order to form friendships for our children, they are dependent on us a lot of the time to do that. We need to take them to the friend's house or set up a play date with the other parent, and we have to put something else on right now. And we have all of these distractions like right now.
And interrupted conversations.
Yeah. And what sort of effort is actually required, not only for our friendships, but for the friendships of our children, for the friendships of our self-care? What actual effort is required, and do we have the bandwidth for that? Because I feel like the effort required sometimes is quite significant. It takes a lot of organizing and coordinating and relying on other people, which sometimes people are not reliable. Let's be honest. For a number of reasons. It's not even a reliability issue, it's just a life issue.
Because
people get busy.
Yeah, I can make plans either weeks in advance or last minute, and there's no rhyme or reason to that. And who gets involved in those plans? And it's been on my to have like a community calendar that like I can put, well, when is my availability, or what am I doing that it's open for someone else to join us? And that's like, it's been on my mind to do this, and I don't know how to get it done. But I feel like that would solve a lot of that like weirdness of trying to find the time for other people to build those friendships, and also to find the time to make those arrangements too.
Yeah. And not only that, he doesn't want that. He doesn't want that one. I can't get to the computer right now on the other side of the house. I had a really great thought then for a second, and it's lost me. Give me a minute. Yeah, here we go. I'll get you to follow a train of thought for a second.
Well,
You've got friends from childhood. Tell me about how that's looked now that you've got kids and what's happened. Tell me the story for a second.
So I have one friend that I've known since we were both. Oh, the picture that is in your book of me as a little girl, I was in that dance recital with my best friend, who that's where we met. So 3 and 4 years old. And we had gotten married within 2 weeks of each other and had babies within 6 months of each other. So now our kids are going to be growing up the same way we grew up. So it's hard. She's got her own business as an entrepreneur, and I have my own business as an entrepreneur. And now the way that we make time for each other is attending each other's events. So it ends up revolving around our work, just like it does virtually for everyone in our community. And it's hysterical to me because our kids are now growing up virtually together, where, like, say your son and my son now know each other by name because they've known each other their whole lives virtually. So wild.
Yeah, and is that the new norm? And does that then start to create this desire for more physical interactions later on, which then for young teenage boys and girls, which is, again, coming back to that whole sort of dating app thing, we start off in a non-physical space. Does that then increase the desire for physical interactions and sex and all sorts of other
things I don't want to talk about in another 10 years of here.
I know, but it's I feel like I'm looking down the tunnel right now, because it's really changing a lot. But coming back to the effort required, how often do you receive a message from a friend like, oh yeah, I'll open it up, I'll have a look, and then I'll get back to that later when I got a hand free, and then like a week or two and you're like, oh, I'm such a bad friend.
Yeah, I was never like that until I had my son. Never like that. I always got mad when other people did that to me.
Yeah.
And now I'm that person.
Is that actually something that we can realistically fix, though, without needing to be on 100% of the time and have a full tank and full bandwidth? It comes back to that self-care, right? Sometimes self-care might be responding to that message before you clean up the milk that's been spilled all over the kitchen. However, the default is still to go to the milk.
Yep.
Which is part of what we need to do now in these conversations, is at least start to go, oh, there's my default again. Why? Why can't I just respond to that message? What's wrong with me? Ah.
Half the time we don't have the bandwidth to even come up with a response, or if it's, trying to make plans, well, I don't really want to look at my calendar right now. I have 10 billion other things on my mind that switching things in my mind to go into planning mode sometimes just isn't the right time.
Yeah.
And then once it's out of sight, it's out of mind.
Yeah.
I'll go.
I hope that by saying it out loud, at least it's the start of the acknowledgement and the start of the
I stopped
trying to.
I know I can't answer, and like waiting until I see that I didn't get to it yet.
Yeah, but then it becomes this like, oh, the notifications on my phone tell me I've got
Uh,
like 17 unopened messages. That thing gives me more anxiety. And then I'm like, oh, ah, ah. And then I open the messages and then I get overwhelmed. And then I'm like, oh,
No easy way.
Mm. We'd love to know if you have experienced the same thing.
Yeah. Let us know. The struggle is real. Hopefully not just
Well, I know definitely from this end, I value your friendship more and more each week. The more that we have these conversations, and yeah, I really am so very grateful and appreciate it.
Linda. I don't
Yeah.
the conversations that we have based on this podcast, around this podcast, in this podcast is just food for the soul.
It is.
Get through
It
some
is.
tough days together. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And as always, until next week.
We hope you can unstuck your mess.
Love you. Bye.